The early signing period brought us drama we were not prepared for, like the infamous Publix cake Cormani McClain stranded when he chose not to sign with Miami early. We'll tell you when his decision is expected and when he will finally let them eat cake. And did you know that Cam Newton played a role in the biggest five-star flip of the class? Hear the story from Dante Moore himself. All that and more as the College Football Recruiting Show starts right now. Welcome in alongside Blair Angulo. I'm Emily Proud. Blair is once again joining us from San Antonio, the site of the All-American Bowl coming up this Saturday. We'll have more on that shortly, but do not forget to submit your questions on today's show and we will answer them at the end. But first, let's hit the headlines. An early signing period stunner, five-star Cormani McClain not putting pen to paper for Miami. It's hard to forget that image of the really sad and lonely cake at his signing day celebration. But he told our director of scouting, Andrew Ivins, and Gabby Urrutia of Inside the U that he will announce his decision on January 15th. Now, the question that everybody wants to know, outside of what the heck happened to the cake, is how are we feeling about him sticking with the U, Blair?
Yeah, he relayed to defensive analyst DeMarcus Van Dyke, according to Andrew Ivins, that Miami has nothing to worry about. But we will see. Crazier things have happened in this recruitment already, and we'll be antsy to see what McClain does, and obviously if he sets 2 or 3 alarms this time around when he announces his decision on January 15th.
Expect the unexpected. Meanwhile, in the portal, Wake Forest quarterback Sam Hartman has committed to Notre Dame. Now, it was trending that way for the top quarterback in the portal. Now it's official. So what does his addition mean for Notre Dame?
It immediately boosts Notre Dame as a viable college football playoff contender. At times, it seemed like the Irish have needed a steady and consistent production at their quarterback position, and Hartman brings 38 touchdown passes with him, which tied for 5th nationally in the 2022 season.
All right, national recruiting analyst Greg Biggins put in a crystal ball for five-star tight end Deuce Robinson to Georgia. Blair, you also have one in for the Dogs. Why?
4 words, Emily. Development under Todd Hartley. The Georgia tight ends coach seems to have the blueprint down. And despite already signing 2 4-star tight ends in the 2023 class, I like where things are trending with the Dogs for the Elite 2 sport hopeful Deuce Robinson.
One of 2 5-star receivers bound for USC was named our 24/7 Sports Alpha Dog for his performance in the Under Armour All-America game on Tuesday night. Zachariah Branch returned a punt 92 yards for a score and tore it up throughout the week. What makes Branch so special?
You see it there on your screen. It's his electrifying speed and explosiveness in the open field. Zachariah Branch should bring plenty of juice to an already stacked wide receiver room for reigning Heisman Trophy winner Caleb Williams. And Lincoln Riley should have plenty of fun ways to integrate him into the offense as a true freshman. Branch will also be able to boost USC's abilities as a return specialist.
All right, speaking of pass catchers, Oklahoma State wide receiver Bryson Green entered the portal yesterday. That marks now 3 of their top 5 wideouts hitting the portal since Tuesday. You got quarterback Spencer Sanders also in search of a new home. Without speculating here, though, Blair, what does this much turnover on one single unit signal to you?
Yeah, it just means, unfortunately, that for Oklahoma State, it means that the group is turned off by the loss of Spencer Sanders. He was the most reliable quarterback in the Big 12, one of the more productive ones in the country, and the Cowboys definitely need to pick things up and add pieces ahead of the spring practice season.
All right, later in the show, we'll get some more intel on where Spencer Sanders could be headed and some of the other Oklahoma State transfers. But speaking of intel, come on, let's check in with our director of recruiting, Steve Wiltfong. Steve, also in San Antonio ahead of the All-American Bowl. And just like we saw Tuesday, there's going to be some more in-game commitments. So let's roll through some of them, starting with 2023 wide receiver Malik Elzy. What's the latest with his recruitment?
Yeah, former Cincinnati commit who reopened his process in October. I like where Illinois is trending with Malik Elzy. They never backed off him, got an official visit in June, and continue to work on him even when he was committed to Cincinnati. Now, I think with Luke Fickell and many of that staff making the move to Madison, it's made the Badgers interesting, but home cooking the opportunity to come help Illinois continue to develop as a program under Brett Bielema and company is very exciting to Malik Elzy. This is a program that had a terrific defense this fall, but needs dynamic playmakers on offense, game changers in the receiver room. Malik Elzy would add to that, and I like where Illinois stands going into his commitment.
Steve, TCU seemed to be the favorite for athlete Mikael Harrison Pilot, but earlier this week, you flipped your crystal ball from the Horned Frogs to Houston. What compelled you to make that switch in your prediction ahead of the announcement?
Yeah, well, he took a late official visit to both programs, and I think that last official visit to Houston reminded him of how much at home he feels on the Cougars campus. His dad played for Houston. He's been visiting there for camps and football recruiting activities for years. Has built a great relationship with Coach Shorts over there. Dana Holgerson's offense is an exciting one. And then the development of guys like true freshman receiver Matthew Golden is also enticing to Mikael Harrison Pilot. And I think that they're in terrific position to land the pass catcher going into his announcement.
How about Jamari Johnson? He's been committed to Louisville since April, but did not sign in December. So where do things stand with him and Jeff Brom?
Yeah, and he's entertained opportunities from Oregon and Pittsburgh, and I think the Ducks have given him a lot to think about going into Saturday's announcement. But talking to him this week and talking to other sources with knowledge of the recruitment, I think he's going to end up sticking with Louisville. Louisville's had a lot of big wins this cycle on the trail, and I think keeping Jamari Johnson in the fold would be a big one for this new staff, Jeff Brom and company.
Let's move on to big offensive tackle Caden Jones out of New Orleans. Steve, the most recent official visits were to Florida and Texas A&M. Your crystal ball is on the Gators. How do you see this one shaking out?
Yeah, also took an official visit to Houston. So Coach Holgerson and company in on some big-time guys here late in the cycle. But as you said, I do like Florida here for Caden Jones. Visited back in the summer, returned for a game this fall, took his official visit in December. Long-standing relationship with Billy Napier and company going back to Coach Nape's time at the University of Louisiana. I think on his official visit, getting an opportunity to be around some of the commits and guys in the locker room who really fit in there, and Coach Sale and the abundance of offensive line coaches that Florida has in that building, I think it's a place where he could really see himself developing. Blair, as you know, he's the biggest young man here, the only one to measure in at over 6'7". He's extremely long. He's got massive features here, big hands. He's got a lot of exciting developmental upside there. Florida, to turn their program around, they need big recruiting wins at the point of attack on both sides, and I think this is one that goes their way.
Okay, I don't have the specs on the top of my mind for 2023 corner Tyler Scott. I'm thinking shorter than 6'7", though. He's also announcing on Saturday the Crystal Balls, saying Auburn. Do you still like the Tigers to land the 3-star?
Yeah, absolutely. And he's one of the more physically ready defensive backs to come in and play on the next level based on what we've seen at the All-America Bowl practice here. He's been in on a ton of plays, too. So a guy that at one point was committed to Arkansas State that really changed his fortunes with good film as a senior, that's carried over to the All-America Bowl. He took official visits to Alabama, Auburn, Texas, USC, also entertained Michigan and several others. But I think led by Zach Etheridge and Coach Crime, Wesley McGriff, the new staff at Auburn, and being able to help build something, I think that's what excites him about the Plains. And I think that Auburn adds him to a class that currently ranks number 20 nationally. And alongside guys like Kayan Lee and Sylvester Smith and Terrence Love would give them a sneaky good defensive back haul in the SEC.
Steve, we've seen Jelani McDonald over the course of this week at the All-American Bowl, the number 5 rated athlete in the country. He's been tremendous all week. Who is going to get Jelani McDonald?
Yeah, he's been as good as anybody. He's been in San Antonio through a few days of practice here, a guy that's a tremendous athlete that can play a number of positions on the next level. My crystal ball is on Texas. Texas has the number 3 recruiting class in the country. This is a former Oklahoma State commit that visited TCU in Texas a couple times since reopening his process. And I think the opportunity to sit down with Coach Choate on his official visit to Texas in mid-December, where he was able to show him how he would be utilized in the defense, has separated the Longhorns from the other schools. This is a guy who's got terrific cover ability. He can play corner. He can play safety. He can play rover. He can come down in the box and be physical. He's out here checking the best receivers in the country one-on-one on an island. This would be a massive get for a much improved Texas defense that wants to take another step forward with another terrific recruiting class. We know Anthony Hill's been a terrific linebacker here for them, but to add him to Malik McDonald and Derek Williams in the secondary would be massive for Steve Sarkisian and company, and I think they're going to do it.
All right, Saturday's game will feature the top talent in the 2023 class, but one of the top players in the 24 class also making his announcement during the game. That's four-star safety Peyton Woodyard. His finalists are Georgia, USC, Notre Dame, and Ohio State, but where are you leaning, Steve?
I like where Georgia stands for Peyton Woodyard, but this one has gotten exciting down the stretch. I think that Ohio State was always the program that was considered 1B to Georgia's 1A. He's visited Athens several times, including Georgia's victory over Tennessee, great relationship with Fran Brown, Kirby Smart, Will Muschamp and company. But Texas, who you did not list, they come in the last couple weeks, make this awfully interesting. Perhaps he goes to Texas, but I'm sticking with my Georgia crystal ball going into Peyton Woodyard's announcement.
Georgia's also in the mix for TJ Capers, the number 2 rated edge in the 2024 class, who will also reveal his announcement on Saturday. Colorado, USC, Miami, Louisville also in that top 5. What's the latest with Capers, Steve?
Well, I like where Louisville stands for TJ Capers, led by one of the best off-field recruiters in the country, John Herron, also known as Hova. Has got terrific relationships in South Florida, and TJ Capers is a guy that he's got his hooks into, and he loves what Louisville's doing and the potential with that program. He also has a relationship with Coach Ivey, a holdover from the last staff under Coach Brom and company. He's going to coach the backers. TJ Capers, a guy that's got a lot of developmental upside as an edge rusher. We saw Louisville get some major recruiting wins in 2023. I think that they get off and running here in 2024 with a big one from 24/7 Sports Composite 5-star TJ Capers.
Okay, so we just ran through all of the guys expected to make their commitments during the All-American game. But Steve, I'm checking our chat right now on YouTube. People have a million questions for you, so I'm gonna put you on the spot here and pick out one. Okay, this one is from Blake F. Where does Oregon sit with 5-star Nicholas Harbor? Oregon.
Well, I'm glad you asked this question because I actually talked to a source today about it. And I think that Oregon's a program that could really be on the rise in this recruitment. This is a young man whose aspirations right now are to run in the next Olympics and try and win a gold medal. And there's no program on his short list with a track record of developing Olympians than Oregon. So you have Michigan, you have South Carolina, and you have Maryland. Those are 3 programs that are in terrific position for him going into this trip with Oregon. But I think that Oregon has a lot of runway going into this January official to make a major move, because I think him trying to win a gold medal is way more relevant than people have been talking about here as of late. And so track is going to be a major component of his decision. And Oregon has the track record with guys like Devin Allen and DeAnthony Thomas and several guys that are on their football team right now that are also doing track. It's Track Capital USA. They have historic Hayward Field out there. I think he's going to love his official visit, so we'll see if the Ducks can make a move. Michigan and Maryland have always been in great position. Fantastic relationship with the South Carolina commits and their staff. But keep an eye on Oregon. That's a big official visit, and I can't wait to see what happens coming out of it.
Okay, runway, track record. I see what you're doing there, Steve. You thanked me for asking the question, but I want to thank Blake. That was a great question. We'll see what happens there. If you have more for Steve, you should check out new episodes of the Wiltfong Whip Around, dropping every Monday and Friday on the 24/7 Sports YouTube page. Well, sticking with the theme, being the All-American Bowl, is not just a series of commitments like we talked about. There is, of course, the actual game. Yesterday, Blair caught up with Cooper Petagna and Brandon Huffman to give us some players to watch.
Joining us now are Brandon Huffman, National Recruiting Editor at 24/7 Sports, and Cooper Petagna, National Analyst at 24/7 Sports, to break down the standouts from the first few practices at the 2023 All-American Bowl in San Antonio. And Cooper, let's begin with you, who has been your alpha through the first couple practices.
It's got to be Keon Keeley, the number 1 defensive player in the country and a top 5 prospect for us at 24/7 Sports. I mean, this guy's been super disruptive over the last 2 days in San Antonio, and some of the best offensive linemen in the country here. Everybody's had an issue with this guy, and he can beat you in a multitude of ways, whether it's an explosive first step or whether it's going speed to power. He's got super heavy hands, and I think he's a little bit further along than we thought. We knew Keon Keeley was a special player, but he has been special this week. It kind of feels very similar to the week that Mykel Williams had last year here in San Antonio, and we've seen what Mykel Williams has done for the University of Georgia. I wouldn't be surprised if Keon Keeley has that impact year one in Tuscaloosa for Nick Saban.
And my guy this week has been Jan Pierre, and it's just, poor Nick Saban. He goes and gets a guy like Jan Pierre as the second best edge rusher in his class. And, Coop, you mentioned the similarities between Keon Keeley and Mylan Williams. I'm reminded of a couple of years ago when there was this little-known guy. I mean, he was a top 100 guy, but all the attention was on Brian Brzee. And over the course of 1 week in San Antonio, Will Anderson shot up the charts, ended up at a 5-star with 24/7 Sports. With Jan Pierre, you're seeing that similar type of rise this week where not a lot of exposure to him. You don't see him a lot of the places in the spring and the summer. Then you see him in San Antonio and active. That's what he's been all week, whether it's against the really good West offensive line he was going up against in practice, whether it's the East offensive line he was going up in the joint practice. What we're seeing from Jan Pierre is something that's going to get Alabama fans very excited. What a heck of a pass rushing duo for Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide. Jan Pierre has been my guy this week, but the alpha for me for the West easily on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, Jordan Hall, by Job, a couple other pass rushers that have really stood out in one-on-one battles through the first couple practices. Cooper, the guys that they're trying to get after have been making some plays as well. We're talking about the quarterbacks, and you like Dante Moore and what you've seen out of the future UCLA Bruin.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a slow start, I think, for all the quarterbacks. Pretty fair to say. I mean, day one, a lot more install. I think day two kind of picked up a little bit more intensity. We saw East and West link up today in the afternoon practice, and in that 11-on-11 team period, that's kind of where you saw Dante Moore go to work. He hit Brandon Ennis on a really nice touch pass in the corner to Carnell Tate when they're working red zone. And this is a guy who's just really methodical. It's really nothing sexy. He just plays within himself, knows how to move the chains. We've seen that throughout the entire course of his career at Martin Luther King in Detroit for 4 years. And he's done that today. This is the guy that we expected. And listen, for us, he's one of the top quarterbacks, one of the top players in the country. This is what you would expect for a player of that type of caliber. So to see him go to work today, I think, I don't want to say it's a sigh of relief for us, but it's in line with the expectations that we had for Dante Moore this week.
I keep bringing up history. I'm a historian. Hey, we're in a historical town here, guys. San Antonio, a lot of history in the Alamo City, but I'm going to go back to 3 years ago again. And there was a seldom talked about early on quarterback from Southern California that not a lot of people talked about because it was all about Bryce. It was all about DJ. And over the course of a year, you just saw this ascension from a guy who ended up at OSU. That was CJ Stroud at Ohio State. This week, I'm brought back because we got another Southern California quarterback, a little bit overshadowed by Nico Yamaliava. Malachi Nelson, he's headed to OSU himself, but it's Oregon State. Aiden Childs, what a week he has had. He threw an interception early, and then that kind of just got him going. It got his game up to another level. He looked good on the first day of practice, but then in the Dome on Wednesday afternoon, you just saw why Aiden Childs has continued to quietly climb the charts and why Jonathan Smith is so excited about him coming to Corvallis, where, interestingly enough, he'll probably spend a year backing up DJ, who just transferred there. But you look at the development of Aiden Childs. Found out today that, this was a guy that didn't turn 17 until his senior year began in high school. In an era where there's so many quarterbacks that are 18, 19 years old in high school, he's still young. And you're seeing that gradual growth from him as a player. He had a zone read down at the goal line that he was able to keep that ball tucked into his running back's chest right until the last possible second. The whole defensive line bit. He ends up breaking it off, gets into the end zone. And you see those kind of plays. You see the athleticism that he has. But Aiden wants to beat you with his arm. He doesn't want to just beat you with his legs. He wants to beat you with his arm. He'll spend a year getting coached up, getting developed, sitting and watching DJ run that Oregon State offense. But that year with Jonathan Smith is going to be so crucial for him that I think Aiden Childs is continuing to get better and better. We're going to see his best football played when he's in Corvallis.
Yeah, Oregon State certainly getting one of the better players in the state of California. So Jonathan Smith will be very happy once Aiden Childs arrives in Corvallis. He's one of the top prospects in the West, but who are some other eye catchers for you, Coop, nationally that you've been able to see this week?
Well, I'm going to go to Texas. I'm going to go to Jelani McDonald, a guy that we have right now as an athlete, but he spent the majority of the day working at the cornerback spot. And for a guy that's been moving around all of his career playing on both sides of the ball, he seemed very comfortable at the corner spot. He got matched up with Carnell Tate, the Ohio State signee, one of the best receivers in the country. And he went to work. This is a guy that had a really good day. He seemed very natural there. Jelani McDonald, one of the only guys at the All-American Bowl who is still yet to sign in commit. So a decision coming up for him. So a lot of eyeballs are going to be on Jelani McDonald, but Cordell Russell on the other side of the ball as well. A big targeted guy, very physical, has an excellent track and field background as well. He's going to end up playing his ball in Fort Worth at TCU. And these are some of the guys that have had success at TCU in the past. We've seen Quentin Johnson, the career that he's had in Fort Worth. So I love what TCU's getting there in a big physical pass catcher. And then the other one, listen, I know we've talked a lot about Alabama. It's been a lot of the defensive talk, but Caden Proctor is everything we thought he would be as the number one offensive lineman in the country. Big physical kid. And Alabama needs help on that offensive line. Caden Proctor, in terms of the body type, the athlete, the strength with which he plays, he's going to be ready to go and play early for Nick Saban in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, make no mistake, Caden Proctor is the number one lineman in the country for a reason. I think he showed that these first 2 days through practice that he is an elite pass blocker. But there's a school out west that's done such a remarkable job of offensive line development in the last couple of years. And they got two guys playing in this game. That's the University of Utah, Caleb Lomu and Spencer Fano. And what we've been able to see out of Spencer this week is a lot of positional versatility. He's a tackle by trade. Early on in practice, he was lining up at right tackle opposite Caden Proctor, who was playing left tackle. But then with the center banged up for the West, Spencer slid inside and he's playing center. But wherever he plays, whether it's right tackle, inside at guard, or playing center, he is an elite lineman. There's every reason why he's been the number one lineman almost from start to finish. But you're seeing the athleticism. You're seeing the footwork. You're seeing the continued development of his strength there. And he actually had one of the better reps that I saw on Wednesday in the joint practice against Keon Keeley, where Keon Keeley has the speed and the size, but Spencer Fano was able to neutralize him for the most part in that rep, showed that he belongs on the field with him. I think University of Utah, they've gotten so close to finally winning that Rose Bowl. Consecutive Pac-12 championships. They've got a good line, but now they're starting to really get some good offensive linemen coming out of high school that are already a little bit more advanced. I think Kyle Whittingham's got to be excited about the Caleb Lomu and the Spencer Fano combination, getting the number one offensive prospect in the state. And I think Spencer has shown this week why he's been that top lineman out west for so much time.
How fun will it be to monitor some of those battles in practice between Caden Proctor, Keon Keeley, and all the guys at Alabama, and obviously Spencer Fano doing a lot of really good work this week as well as he starts his career at Utah later this month.
I think game on the line, right? 2-minute drill. You need someone to go in there. Dante Moore is the quarterback that all of our analysts would select. This guy has been lights out, 2-time state champ, has appeared in more varsity games on Friday nights than anyone else in the class of 2023 when it comes to quarterbacks in the top 247. He can make all the throws. And with Dante Moore, the thing a lot of people don't know is he's actually one of the youngest quarterbacks in the class of 2023. Normally, a lot of these guys are held back. They're a bit older. I mean, Stetson Bennett, he's 25, playing for the Georgia Bulldogs. No, Dante Moore still has a ton of good football ahead of him. I think his body's going to mature a little bit. We love him a lot. Again, he is a gamer, but he can still, we can get a little bit more out of him.
The biggest flip of the cycle, and as our friend Andrew Ivins just said, for good reason. Dante Moore now headed to UCLA after a near 5-month-long commitment to Oregon. He's now breaking his silence on that change of heart, and you actually spoke with him, Blair, so here's what he had to say about that decision.
Well, my decision from decommit from Oregon, like I said, there's no love lost at all. Like I said, it was just a personal decision, with Coach Dillingham leaving Arizona State. It's an OC that I had trust in for 3 or 4 years. I still do. We always talk every day to keep building our bond, but things happen. Like I said, I had to sit back and weigh my options, and thankful for UCLA to have open arms with me. I took a visit. Everybody knows what Chip Kelly did, with the development of quarterbacks and the offense he runs and the exposure and the resume he has. So that was a huge piece for me for sure. You're in Hollywood. You're in probably one of the best places in the world. So, like I said, I'm going to enjoy it. Being from Detroit and going to the West Coast is going to be a true blessing.
Emily, we just had the holiday season pass, and I haven't been able to confirm whether or not Chip Kelly sent a Christmas card to the athletic department at ASU for doing what they did and hiring Kelly Dillingham. But that was huge in this process. UCLA really lucked out. They didn't have essentially a premier elite quarterback after going after several of them in this 2023 cycle, but it essentially fell in their laps late in the process. ASU gets their guy, UCLA gets their 5-star quarterback, and obviously that was a huge momentum shift as we look at the landscape out west.
Yeah, and they had added, guys in the portal, but ultimately this is the big fish in grabbing Dante Moore. Excited to see what he does. Meanwhile, the Michigan native is, of course, leaving the old Big Ten country and entering new Hollywood, as he said, and the Bruins are set to join the conference in 2024. So here is more on how much UCLA's move to the Big Ten influenced this decision.
Where I was actually talking to Cam Newton on the phone, and we was talking for a long time, and really he was giving me some pointers and everything to help me, better myself, with physically, mentally, and everything. And one thing he did say through my recruiting process, and one thing that he's went through in college is a lot of times in the college level you need national exposure. I know Pac-12, is a great conference, a great competition over there, but everybody knows the two main conferences, the SEC and the Big Ten, and really UCLA going out there competing, against Penn State, Michigan State, Michigan, all them great teams is a true blessing. And like I said, I have a lot of family in the Midwest, so that's actually another bonus. But really, I know the biggest thing for sure getting out there is trying to help the California boys get used to the cold, because I know it's gonna be pretty cold and many people haven't never seen snow before, but I know I'm used to it and I'm ready to get going.
Okay, first off, I need more on the relationship with Cam Newton. Secondly, though, with the pair of LA schools moving now to the Big Ten, it allows Midwestern players like Moore a chance to leave their region and still play in front of friends and family back home. So how much do you see his decision resonating among some other Midwestern recruits?
Yeah, well, first of all, he did play for Camp Newton's 7-on-7 team, C1N, during the offseason circuit. So very close and very tight with what Cam Newton is doing off the field and in the community. And then second of all, I do feel like this is going to give UCLA and even USC a chance to branch out into the Midwest and become a program that the players in that region can look to if they still want to play Big Ten football, but maybe leave the region, leave home, get a little bit away from what they're familiar with. It's going to really help UCLA and USC to at least go into that region and go and get some guys that potentially could be looking at playing in Los Angeles, playing under the bright lights. And then when Dante Moore is essentially on the field recruiting for UCLA, it could give them a good boost with players that know who he is.
Yeah, it's the best of both worlds, right? You still get to play in the Midwest, but you also get some pretty awesome home games when you see Michigan playing in December, and it's going to be a lot better in LA. All right, let's show you one last clip of your conversation. Now that Moore has officially signed with UCLA, the attention now centers around his development and what he can accomplish at the next level. Outgoing Bruins quarterback DTR was a great example of what learning under Chip Kelly can do for that quarterback's development, and Moore quickly recognized that.
I got to talk to Dorian, and I talked to Coach Chip, and they really broke down how his quarterback, development kind of was from going from, Bishop Gorman being at a high school, really being a receiver first, then being a quarterback. And, as a coach, as a head coach that has a great resume, and, going from quarterbacks that are pro style or dual threats. And, Dorian is crazy and, real scary with his legs and, of course, with his arm too. But, having a coach, Coach Chip that can adjust the offenses, him being with, Mike Vick, him being with, Marcus Mariota, great quarterbacks like that. But him, understand what Dorian's, strengths are and his weaknesses and really adjusting to that. But Dorian is a great person, great, strong mentally and physically. And he's a person that if he's out in the field, just watch out for his hurdle because everybody knows he's going up top.
What's interesting about that comment is that Chip Kelly has shown in the past a willingness to trust a young quarterback with his offense. Marcus Mariota started at Oregon as a redshirt freshman, basically unseating Darren Thomas, who had led them to a Rose Bowl. And this is, I think, a player that from the neck up has everything that you want. All the intangibles, the demeanor, the composure, the smarts, the intellectual ability to pick up an offense quickly. We've seen him here at the All-American Bowl practices be really calm and cool and collected and really, I think, confident in his own ability. So him heading into UCLA as a true freshman in the spring, I wouldn't put it past him to beat out whoever else is in that room, including Colin Schlee, another transfer portal player that they picked up from Kent State this offseason, as well as a number of other 4-stars that Chip Kelly landed in previous years.
Yeah, you've seen him do it before, and it was really that long-term marriage, too, between Kelly and Dorian Thompson-Robinson. 5 straight years of working together. really paid off this year. Well, you can find that entire conversation and all things UCLA football on Bruin Report online. Speaking of quarterbacks switching things up, Wake Forest quarterback Sam Hartman is now a member of the Fighting Irish. Hartman just announcing it on Twitter with the caption, "Onward." And when it's time to hit the portal, we have to hit up our portal expert, Chris Hummer. Chris, the rumors and the ties surrounding Hartman and Notre Dame didn't all of a sudden come out of nowhere. They have been rampant since even before he entered the portal. In your estimation, though, why is this a good marriage?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a marriage that's been going on for a while, I would say, well before he entered the portal, as you said. But Notre Dame needed a ceiling raiser at quarterback. Notre Dame hasn't had a top 40 offense since Ian Book left campus. They haven't had a top 25 offense since 2017. Sam Hartman is the type of player who can step in right away and raise the ceiling of the program. He's both a steadying presence, somebody who can be more consistent than Tyler Buchner. Tyler Buchner, a very talented quarterback who started the year as a starter for Notre Dame, but as we saw, a little turnover prone in the bowl game and also a little injury prone as he's been throughout his career. So Sam Hartman is a bit of a bridge for him. And then more than anything, like, he elevates the Notre Dame offense. He can stretch the field. Notre Dame only had 4 passing plays of 40-plus yards this year. That ranked 117th nationally. Sam Hartman had 11 of them by himself for Wake Forest this season. He's one of the better deep ball throwers in the country. And I think him stepping into that offense instantly makes the Notre Dame attack a little bit better.
Chris, Sam Hartman is off the board, but let's move on to some other quarterbacks that are still looking for a landing spot. That would be Virginia transfer Brennan Armstrong. It looks like the contenders are beginning to emerge for him. What's the latest in Armstrong's recruitment?
Yeah, so Wisconsin took Tanner Mordecai, so they're off the board for Brennan Armstrong. He took a visit there before the dead period started. That leaves Oklahoma State, NC State, and Auburn. I think if you read the tea leaves a little bit, you might be able to knock Oklahoma State off that group. Armstrong got to Oklahoma State before the dead period. He has chosen to wait things out until the second round of visits. So he's looking at other opportunities. Personally, right now, I think NC State's the heavy favorite here. I think there's a good chance Armstrong's on campus soon, if not now. And he also has a pretty good connection at the NC State program with Robert Anae, who's their new offensive coordinator coming over from Syracuse. Robert Anae was Armstrong's offensive coordinator back in 2021 when he led the Power 5 in passing yards per game. They had a lot of success together, and I think that marriage makes a ton of sense. Maybe Auburn pushes hard at the end of this and changes things. Auburn can clearly be more aggressive than NC State from an NIL standpoint, but I really do like the Wolfpack here right now.
Both of those schools need a quarterback. Well, we mentioned earlier in the show the hits that the Cowboys continue to take on offense, so let's start with Spencer Sanders. He's been in the portal for a few weeks now. Where does his recruitment stand?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I reported before Christmas that Auburn and Ole Miss had both shown significant interest in Sanders. I think Ole Miss probably a little bit more than Auburn. And I think both schools are still in play. I think there's some academic stuff that factors in with Sanders as well. But a popular rumor, at least recently, is Spencer potentially returning to school. I'm not ruling that out. But I think there would have to be changes at Oklahoma State on the offensive staff for him to ultimately come back. So that's something to watch the next couple days and weeks for Mike Gundy and his staff. Either way, he's a really experienced four-year starter who can make an impact somewhere. It'll be interesting to follow where he ends up because, to my knowledge at least, he hasn't taken any visits yet. So it'll be a interesting process for Spencer.
Sticking with Oklahoma State, wide receiver John Paul Richardson, he finished second on the team in receptions last season, and that receiver room in Stillwater, Chris, is looking a little bit different in 2023 than it did last year. What's the latest with Richardson as the former Oklahoma State receiver looks for a new home?
Yeah, one of 3 Oklahoma State receivers to enter the portal this week. So that's essentially 4 of Oklahoma State's top 5 receivers moving on from the program this offseason. Not great news in Stillwater in general. But with John Paul Richardson, I really like TCU here. This is a team I've been hearing with Richardson since the moment he entered the portal. I think he'd be a natural fit in Fort Worth. My crystal ball pick is already actually in for TCU on Richardson. I think they are in the driver's seat in this recruitment. One school I would point out as a team to watch is Texas A&M. Richardson's dad, Bucky, was a notable quarterback for the Aggies back in the day. If they were to push hard, potentially that could change things. But right now, I really like the Horned Frogs and where they sit.
Legacy player, perhaps. All right, we'll keep an eye on that. Now, as for some top defensive players available, I mean, look no further than 2022 five-star defensive lineman Anthony Lucas. He's seeking a new home after a year with the Aggies. So who are some interested parties there?
Yeah, I know Blair's been all over this recruitment since high school for him, but checking in with some people, I really like where UCLA sits for Anthony Lucas at the moment. I think the Bruins are in an excellent position. Y'all talked a lot about UCLA already today with Dante Moore, and I think Anthony Lucas could potentially be a splash play for them as well. Lucas is definitely an academically focused individual. I think schools like Notre Dame, potentially USC, are going to be in the mix for him, but at least based on what I'm hearing early on, I like UCLA and where they sit. I don't think his process is going to drag out either. I think he could decide pretty quickly, potentially without even taking visits. So watch the Bruins, watch the Irish. Those are two schools that definitely stand out for Anthony Lucas.
Yeah, Anthony Lucas loved those schools during the recruiting process, and A&M's appeal, the SEC, that defensive line that they were building in the 2022 recruiting cycle, all really pulled him into College Station. But I think as he moves forward, I think he's going to look at the situation a little bit differently. Balance the academics with the football. His father and his mother are actually Miami alums, so I'd be interested to see if the Hurricanes get involved here. I know Mario Cristobal had pursued him really heavily when he was at Oregon, and even drew a visit from Anthony Lucas. So that's another school to monitor with Anthony is Miami. But I would tend to side with Chris right now. I do think that the UCLA Bruins have been in a really good spot with him, and they need the help up front, especially in the defensive line. So, Anthony Lucas looking at UCLA very closely, and we'll see what he kind of does here in the next few weeks.
I love this. I got a little 2 for the price of 1 answer there with both of you guys offering up some intel on Anthony Lucas. Chris, thank you so much, as always, for the great information. Blair, it's that time of the program where we answer some of your viewer questions. I saw Steve answered one earlier in the show, but the rest of these are for you. So you got this here. This one coming from Robbie Blonde. He's ready for it. Okay. Where will 4-star Roderick Pleasant land? Everybody's always asking you to predict the future. Where's he going?
I think Oregon, USC are in a really good spot for him. I think I see him playing his college ball out west. I typically tend to side with the Trojans for a player from Gardena Serra there in Southern California, even dating back to Adoree Jackson, Robert Woods, Marquise Lee. It seemed like every elite player from Serra has been choosing USC for quite a long time, and they need all the help they can get on the defensive side of the ball. This is a big-time track athlete. Just how we mentioned Zachariah Branch, just like we mentioned with Nicholas Harbor. I think that's another appeal and why I would have Oregon up there for him as well. He's still hoping to maybe take a visit or two in the month of January ahead of the February signing period. Those would be my 2 schools, USC, Oregon, the ones to look for Roderick Pleasant, one of the best players still available here in this 2023 recruiting cycle.
So is he a guy that will want to be a dual sport athlete in college?
Absolutely. He's as fast as anyone in the country. I actually want to see him and Zachariah Branch maybe go to different schools just to see them match up one-on-one and have a little fun during Saturdays. But this is a player who is also a big-time track athlete. And if he focused solely on track, would have those aspirations to potentially make it to an Olympic team. They mentioned it with Nicholas Harbor earlier. We heard Steve talk about Oregon and Eugene is known as Tracktown USA. So that's definitely an appeal and something that has been drawing Roderick Pleasant to Oregon as well.
And it just wouldn't seem fair for either of those programs to have 2 great track athletes if Nicholas Harbor goes there and Roderick Pleasant also goes there, but then, pairing up with Zachariah Branch at USC, also not fair. But that's what's so exciting about the recruiting game. All right, Wayne Glynn asking this one. After Dante Moore, which quarterback has stood out during practices this week?
For me, it's been Aiden Childs, but for the sake of variety, since we already spoke about the Oregon State signee, I'm going to go with Lincoln Kienholz. He's the Ohio State quarterback signee who flipped late from Washington, from the state of South Dakota, 3-sport athlete, plays some baseball, plays some basketball, really fluid and really athletic. I actually love what I'm able to see out of him outside the pocket. He looks like a shortstop turning double plays whenever he's rolling out and letting the ball go. He's been really fun to watch. And he's not a finished product by any means. Sometimes you see some players here, especially the elite ones, that look physically ready for the college level. He still needs to add 20, 25 pounds. But you could see the length, you could see the physical upside. The build is there for him to be a really dynamic playmaker. And he reminds me actually a lot of what we saw from Devin Brown, who's already in that quarterback room in Columbus and is, in a way considered one of those players that's going to be able to take over for CJ Stroud and Ryan Day.
Does he play short? Do you know that?
I think he pitches. I think he plays some infield. He hits really well too. I actually joked with him. I'm like, dude, you look like you just caught a grounder up the middle and you had to sidearm it to get, the ball past the runner who's, trying to crash down on you at second base. And he kind of just smirked at me and he said, yeah, I play a little baseball.
A little baseball. Yeah, I love the translatable skills from sport to sport. All right, Zach Williams asking, could PJ Adebawore be in the conversation with Keon and Damon Wilson as the top edge? That's elite company there.
The reviews are high off of what he was able to do in Orlando this past week at the Under Armour All-America game. And he has all the tools, and they will need it in Oklahoma, right? The Sooners need all the help they can get on the defensive side of the ball. He's really explosive. Apparently, he gave a ton of headaches to all the offensive linemen throughout the week in Orlando. And, it's hard for me to envision someone having the ceiling or the explosiveness that we've seen out of Keon Keeley or maybe even a Damon Wilson. But there's no question that this edge class in 2023 and just the group that's heading into college, the ceiling is as high as anyone positionally that I can remember doing this for over a decade.
Okay, we'll clip that. So we'll show everybody next year when we see all these guys as true freshmen tearing it up. Blair told you back in January. Okay, our next question from Shane here. Who would be your top 3 quarterbacks at the All-American Bowl? You talked a little bit about quarterbacks in an earlier question. Can you rank them for us real quick?
Yeah, I would go Dante Moore, Aiden Childs, and then Lincoln Kienholz. I think right now those have been the ones that have separated themselves. I have to give a shout out also to Pierce Clarkson. He's actually going to be QB1, it looks like, for the West Side. His head coach, Jason Negro from St. John Bosco, is operating the team. He's got his offensive coordinator here. He looks really comfortable with the language and the offense. So I expect the Louisville signee who, has aptly considered, to be one of the bigger brands in this 2023 class, to have a lot of airtime on Saturday during the game. So keep an eye on Pierce Clarkson, really explosive dual threat prospect. But if I had to stack them up, I'd go Dante, Aiden Childs, and Lincoln Kienholz.
Okay. As a reminder, you mentioned it. This is just practice. This is just what you've seen from them in practice all week long. They will actually play some live action on Saturday. Very much looking forward to that game. This next one from, I don't know who this is from, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What is the latest update on Deuce Robinson's recruitment? We did mention him a little bit earlier in the show, but what do you know? You've been so locked in on his recruitment.
Yeah, so he's back in Arizona from competing at the Under Armour All-America game in Orlando. And it's going to be an interesting roadmap for him heading into that decision on signing day, the first day of February, right? He's going to be at the Polynesian Bowl, as far as we know, in Hawaii next weekend for an entire week. So that will scratch out essentially a week that he can take an official visit. He also is playing basketball, Emily, this winter. So that's throwing a loop in his recruiting process as well, because he doesn't know if he's going to be able to make it up to Oregon, which is the only school he would consider taking another visit to before he makes the decision. And then he's also trying to train a little bit during the week for baseball because he's got the baseball season coming up and he doesn't want to be super rusty. So I think right now he's got his hand in a lot of different jars. He's got a lot of different things going. And it's a fascinating recruitment because he already took 4 officials. He has 1 more left. There are schools that are still trying to make their pitches. The in-home meetings are still supposed to take place this month ahead of February, and it's going to be a wild ride. Right now, I like Georgia. I liked USC for such a long time, but obviously Texas, Oregon, Alabama also still trying with the 5-star tight end from the state of Arizona. Yeah,
2 crystal balls right now, one from you and also one from Greg Biggins for Georgia. But as you said, we're a long way from decision day when it comes to everything that he's got to go through to get to that point. Our last one here from Andrew says, do you think Coach Prime will pull any more recruiting coups before next season?
I mean, Cormani McClain is still out there, right?
Oh,
and we would have to assume that if he doesn't sign with Miami on January 15th, that a big reason why he did not sign with Miami is because Coach Prime, Colorado, whatever we want to call, the Louis bag that he's brought over, had a lot to do with that. And that's a school that I have to watch. That's a program, that's a team, that's a name, Coach Prime, that I have to watch and I have to remember whenever we're talking about Cormani McClain, because Cormani wants to be developed for the next level. That's the NFL. And who better to develop him and to help foster his progress and his talent to get the most out of him than one of the better defensive backs in the history of football. So Colorado, one to watch. It sounds like he's saying all the right things about Miami, but crazier things have happened in recruiting, and Coach Prime already did it once last year. Let's see if he can kick off 2023 with another shocker.
Yeah, we did report on signing day when all of this was going down, Cormani McClain not showing up to do the official signing, that there was contact with Colorado. Of course, interest there. He's one of the top players in the country, so we can go ahead and put that out of the way. There is interest between those two parties, so we'll see what happens there. January 15th is, again, the decision day for Cormani McClain. Hopefully, we got pen to paper this time, Blair. Fingers crossed. Thank you so much. That'll do it for us here. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube page. He's Blair Angulo. I'm Emily Proud, and this is the College Football Recruiting Show.